Hello and welcome to this brand new season of Leaders of Tomorrow, the only enabling platform for small businesses. Over the past 7 years, we've understood what matters the most to you, the entrepreneur, and in our 8th year, we're taking head-on 2 of your most pressing concerns, that are funding and mentoring. I'm Sunanda Jayaseelan. Tonight, we're bringing you 2 influencer conversations with experts and leaders in their space who are changing the game when it comes to boosting entrepreneurship and startups here in the country. Our first conversation tonight is with NASSCOM 10,000 Startups. On the other side of a break is Facebook. Now, after an in-depth conversation with Keshav Murugesh, chairman at NASSCOM, he spoke to us on a whole host of issues, including how NASSCOM has a focus on empowering India's startup ecosystem. I spoke with Gaurav Hazra, he's senior director and head India at NASSCOM. He spoke to me on the nitty-gritty of how NASSCOM is really fueling the entire startup ecosystem here in the country by setting up startup hubs, and why he's so passionate really when it comes to the power of startups and technology in the country. Listen in. Gaurav, good having you here on the show with us. I want to start by talking about the fact that, even as you're a director at NASSCOM, you also have your own venture. You're also an entrepreneur yourself. Start sort of detailing for us then your own entrepreneurial journey, what your life as an entrepreneur has been like, what some of those highlights have been.
NASSCOM has been in the startup ecosystem since almost the time startups started coming up in India, which is way back in 2013. And it has done a commendable job in bringing startup as a culture in India and helping the youth understand that startup is a great opportunity to bring innovation out. And our journey in NASSCOM has been pretty good. We run about 10 different startup hubs across the country. We incubated a number of startups. We've been able to bring this whole ecosystem together. So from my perspective, I think it has been a fabulous run so far.
You're very closely associated with the startup ecosystem in India, given your role at NASSCOM. Given that, what sort of perspective can you provide us on how things perhaps are changing? What sort of highlights, what sort of insights can you give our viewers on the tech as well as the startup ecosystem here in the country?
Startup ecosystem in India is right now about 7,500 odd startups, and it's good. It's growing at about 12% overall. Just for the sake of numbers, I think about 1,200 startups got added in 2018. And what is more encouraging is that 50% of the growth is actually coming from startups in the advanced tech segment. So the advanced tech segment is actually growing a little faster than the overall startup segment. So advanced tech would mean typically things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT, blockchain, and data analytics. That's what we call as advanced tech. So this segment is actually growing a little faster than the rest of the overall startup ecosystem. And we are also seeing an increased growth in enterprise software segment, driven by the fact that a lot of enterprises are now looking at digital transformation to solve some of their core problems.
Gaurav, you've been with NASSCOM for just about a year now. So, as someone who has such an overview when it comes really to the startup ecosystem in the country and to technology and tech disruption, what sort of highlights can you share with our viewers? What sort of insights can you share with our viewers about how perhaps the tech ecosystem has been changing and what your own view really is on that?
NASSCOM has been in the startup ecosystem since almost the time startups started coming up in India, which is way back in 2013. And it has done a commendable job in bringing startup as a culture in India and helping the youth understand that startup is a great opportunity to bring innovation out. And our journey in NASSCOM has been pretty good. We run about 10 different startup hubs across the country. We incubated a number of startups. We've been able to bring this whole ecosystem together. So from my perspective, I think it has been a fabulous run so far.
I want to talk very specifically about one of your programs at this point, Gaurav, which is the NASSCOM Industry Partnership Program. I understand it's a partnership with Credit Suisse. Just run us through that.
NIPP is a very interesting program that NASSCOM runs. And a couple of years ago, we identified this need of startup to be able to work with larger companies, and larger companies to be able to leverage the innovation and disruptive work that is happening in startups. So we came up with this great piece of program called the NASSCOM Industry Partnership Program, which is called NIPP. As a part of the NIPP program, we invite enterprises, large corporations, global companies, captives into the program, where these companies come up with some of their mainstream problems, which can potentially be addressed by innovation that is happening in the startup community.
For anyone who is associated with the tech industry, perhaps the keyword really is innovation and and essentially moving forward. How does NASSCOM, as the industry body, then enable that?
So I think from the last many years, NASSCOM has always tried to catalyze tech and innovation. There are various parts of NASSCOM that work in this direction in its own capacity. Just to give you some examples, NASSCOM started the Center of Excellences for Deep Tech, which is some of the advanced tech that you hear of, whether it is AI or machine learning or IoT, blockchain. And that helps a lot of startups to actually get into the Center of Excellences, work on real life problem with the industry, and stay ahead of the curve on tech. Apart from this, NASSCOM also runs point initiatives like something called as a Deep Tech Club, where we work with startups to actually bring them up to speed on modern tech, on future tech, and help them sort of adopt future tech for their product development. And in addition to this, we also work on various other areas of future tech, whether it is AI or it is smart cities and things like that, to help the ecosystem understand and absorb most of the tech changes that are happening across the world.
Tech disruption is perhaps the hottest word right now when it comes to the entire digital ecosystem and the entire tech ecosystem. But my question to you, Gaurav, is if you can help our viewers understand really what it means in the domestic context. In India, what does it really mean?
I think it's a very interesting time, and when startups actually started coming up in India a few years ago, we were looking at use cases that were essentially global use cases or based in the Western world. I think tech disruption has sort of changed that direction, and there's a huge drift to use cases in India which can be actually solved with tech disruption. So some of the key opportunities that have come up in this making is tech intervention opportunities for startups in solving some of India's problems. For example, agri-tech, so technology in agriculture, technology in health, education, citizen services, logistics, water. So many areas where India as a country has diverse problems, and the usage of tech in these areas have opened up huge opportunities for Indian startups to address some of these problems, not just for India, but also make it for the world out of India.
Gaurav, I want to talk about how, technologies like agile, cloud computing, machine learning, robotics, etc. How's it really changing the hiring landscape? Because you also need, on one hand, the people who understand this technology, and on the other hand, how people are hired is also changing. How do you really view how that's changing when it comes to people and people operations?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. The introduction of new tech, whether it is cloud, whether it is AI, or IoT, blockchain, will change the fabric of resources that is required to drive these requirements and products. That would also mean that it would change some of the hiring that the industry has been traditionally doing in terms of skills. It also means that there is somewhere, as we get aligned to these technologies, there is a whole work on talent that is required, and NASSCOM is actually on the forefront of this, driving this reskilling and talent program for India, where a lot of skills which are existing today needs to be realigned with the future skills that are required in the industry, which are actually required to adopt some of this future tech into our day-to-day lives and products. So I think while the hiring landscape is changing, given that we are seeing a shift in the skills that we need, there is also a huge focus on creating that talent and reskilling. I think both of these work hand in hand.
All right, my last question. What next for you at NASSCOM? What are you personally excited by? What areas are you working on that you can share with us?
Yeah, interesting question. I think we did about 4 or 5 years of the NASSCOM 10,000 Startup Program. And I think as we see it in the future, we are looking at 3 large pieces. We are looking at a much larger incubation strategy where we are able to bring in a startup, make them a part of the ecosystem, help them sort of incubate and sustain. On the other hand, we are looking at market access for startups as a big piece, where we are looking at developing markets for the startup, whether it is in India, Indian government, outside of India, taking them to different parts of the world and making sure that the startups are able to access those markets. And the third and one of the most important piece is access to funding. So as a part of our strategy for Startup 10,000, the third most important piece that we are looking at is access to funding, which means that we are actually working with investors across the globe, including different countries, where we are able to take these startups to these investor groups and sort of help them transact, help them explore each other's interest, and eventually make an investment into these startups. So these 3 parts put together is somehow we can actually look at these as a future roadmap for Startup 10,000.
Gaurav Hazra, good having you on the show as always.
Thank you.
On the other side of a break, we're also going to talk to you about why Facebook is so excited about the domestic landscape and what their plans are for the country when it comes to SMB businesses. Do stay tuned. Back in just a bit. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. Tonight, we're bringing you to the Influencer Conversations, and I'm bringing you an exclusive chat with Facebook's SMB head. I caught up with Archana Vora, Director of Small and Medium Businesses at Facebook India, in this exclusive conversation where she's talking about why Facebook is so positive when it comes to small businesses in India, what some of the specific programs they have for SMEs, and also what advice she has for small businesses when it comes to effectively leveraging digital and technology for their growth. Take a look. Archana, so good to have you here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, and catching up with you again. Still talking small businesses.
Yes, absolutely.
Talking technology and talking about why you at Facebook are so excited about India's small businesses. And maybe we should start there and talk about the big picture. When you at Facebook are looking at small businesses and entrepreneurs in India, what is the vision? How excited are you really about this space?
We've always been exceptionally committed to growing small and medium businesses, and whether it's part of our product strategy or whether it's part of making sure that we're always enabling the SMB ecosystem in India, and that could be done with a varying set of things, right? We're all aware that just being an SMB in India is not easy, right? So ideation is tough, which means there are tons of ideas, but very few of them actually land in execution, and you know that. Funding is tough, sustaining business is tough, and most importantly, skilling for the business is exceptionally tough, which means that while businesses get digitally engaged, they're constantly challenged to say, how do I grow from here? And what really excites me about this is, at Facebook, we seem to be solving for all of this in parts. It's the start of our Big India journey as well. But if I were to just slice that, the first thing really is to say, how do we train? How do we reach out to the 81 million SMBs and a handful of those which are digitally engaged, and train them how to use digital products better? And we do that, we do that through our Boost program. We do that through our Blueprint training, and that's really a way for us to reach out. And then as you scale, you realize that there are challenges of investment. And I'm sure you've heard of our Meesho investment. Meesho is predominantly a reseller network, very largely hinged on homemakers in tier 2, tier 3 cities.
That was your first India investment,
That was
right?
the first India investment. And therefore, again, there we're saying we're going to double down where needed with investment as well. And that's where Meesho flows in. And then a couple of days back, I'm sure you've heard of it, we launched the VC Brand Incubator Program. And what the VC Brand Incubator Program really does is it picks up a handful of micro brands. And then we mentor and skill those brands for them to start growing much faster than they are. The only challenge being, I think, for India and for SMBs in India is that at each step, I think they need a nudge. And the nudge can be via skilling, the nudge can be, we're just talking to them to say, these are the products that can help you grow your business. More importantly, I think what we're very, very focused on is on one hand, we'll talk skilling. On the other, we're also saying all of our products are extremely ROI driven and therefore constantly use the products to make sure you get bang for the buck.
Okay, so when you're looking at the SMB ecosystem, are there any specific areas that are particularly exciting for you? I do know that e-commerce, for instance, is something that everyone is talking about. Are there specific segments that you want to sort of talk to us about?
I think I wouldn't slice it by segment. Okay. I'll again slice it by the need for skill. So let me start with where you left, right? E-commerce. We know we're the third largest e-commerce market globally. We know it's also rapidly growing, and therefore a lot of the mix in the digitally engaged space that you see will be from companies that are just going e-commerce. So, for example, I was having a very interesting interaction a couple of days back with a brand called Desi Hangover, and they do handcrafted leather shoes. Yes. It's a brand that's now gone global. You get them out of Singapore, Malaysia, US, and they started their journey with us. And they employ close to 100 cobblers, out of which 50 are women. And they also run a school and drive value to the community. So I think where we are is we're very committed to growing all of these SMBs. And therefore, if you asked me to slice, where would I cut the slice the hardest? I would cut the slice the hardest at driving growth for them, because I think that's the challenge. Okay. To say, how do we continuously keep driving value for you while ensuring that you get bang for the buck?
Okay. You started this conversation by talking about some of the things that SMBs need. I want to pick up on two things. One is you said funding. You do have the VC Accelerator program that you were talking about. But if you can sort of break that down further and talk about how exactly you're helping small businesses in India solve the funding challenge. Because when we are talking to businesses, and over the past 7-8 years, Leaders of Tomorrow has spoken to thousands of entrepreneurs, 90% of whom are saying that 90% of their challenge really is where's the money coming from.
I think it's two parts, right? I think it's not just where the money is coming from. I think it's also about once the money is in, how do you continuously keep growing at the speed at which you're growing? So I think both of those are challenges. From a funding perspective, as I said, we will on a case-on-case basis look at funding. Meesho was the first. You'll probably, we'll over the next couple of years, you'll probably see some more. But it is going to be on a case-on-case basis. I think where we're more diligently deep diving into is more around skilling and mentoring, because while the funding comes in, I think the larger challenge sets into the business when they hit the ground running, right? They face challenges to say, if I'm an e-commerce player and I have, say a product catalog of 100, how do I make sure that all of these products on the product catalog are visible to customers? How do I get reach? How do I get customers, most importantly, right? That's the big gap that I think we constantly keep filling in, where we say, come to us when you need a larger set of customers, and therefore use our products to get there fast. So I think it's very important to understand that while funding continues to be a challenge, and there will be government intervention to drive that, there will be VC contributions there. I think there's a very large gap to fill when it comes to skilling, mentoring, and then just setting them on the path to scale.
Okay, and India is also the third largest startup ecosystem anywhere across the world. And speaking of the government, we've seen a lot of announcements coming, whether it's ease of taxation, angel tax, etc. Skill India, that's something you were talking about, and the government really pushing that. Digital India, upskilling of workers really. So is it easier now for an SMB, which is in the tech space, to do business in India today versus previously?
I think it is, I think easy or tough would be like just two
relevant
edges
to
of
the
the
business
scale,
you're in,
right?
sure.
But I think it's becoming a lot more, I think there's an awareness about what is it the SMBs need. And so I think there is an orientation and there is some amount of execution. There's obviously a long way to go from where we are just by sheer size. But I think the orientation and also the assistance in execution, right, that is available via the government now certainly makes it simpler, if not easier. And those two things are very distinct from each other to start doing businesses in India. Obviously, those that are more digitally engaged find it also easier to grow their business because they learn how to build their business online, they learn how to solve for logistics online, they learn how to deliver online, they learn how to solve for payments online. You know, with a very, very large cash on delivery economy, they learn to solve for all of those challenges. So I think it's probably a tad easier for those that are digitally aware, even if not digitally engaged. But there's still a very, very long way to go.
Speaking of which, in fact, and you know, my next question is the fact that it's great we have initiatives like Digital India, Skill India, etc. But most of India's and most of Indians are living outside of your metros, living outside of your cities, are still living in the villages. As Facebook, how do you perhaps then try and bridge this gap between those businesses that are clearly there in your tier 4 and tier 5 towns with the markets that are outside of those spaces?
So I think, again, I'll slice this, right? For those that are not online, I think we're very committed to the digital literacy charter that we drive. We're also very committed to continuing to do the Boost program that we run out of Facebook, which is really for people who are starting up and training them just to be online. And then at the other end of the spectrum are those that are looking for growth. I think we're constantly trying to make that bridge to say for those who are not online, there's a host of utilities, there are a host of programs you can avail for you to take that journey and to make that punt to say, I want to grow my business online. And on the other end of the spectrum, for those that are already growing in some form, agnostic to whether they're, you know, from the CPG space, e-commerce space, edtech space, we're trying to work with them to say, now that you have the funds or you have the intention, let us try and see how we can use our family of products to drive ROI and ROAS for you so that you can continue to do more of what you're doing without really losing profitability for your business. And so these are two, I think, constant, almost parallel tracks that we run, where there is, you know, a completely different set of solutions for very different sets of SMBs.
Okay, Archana, great having you here on the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.
All right, that's all we could manage to pack into tonight's show. Thanks so much for watching. Our contact details coming up in just a moment. Do let us know what you've thought of tonight's interviews. Have a good night.